A Cripple Should Lie on the Ground. Written by Johnny Fist. Earthly blessings are far from available to everyone, and not even because that's just how life turned out, but because that is how one was born. In such cases, fighting for anything becomes even harder and heavier. You resist both what is outside you and what is inside you, and very often this struggle is unsuccessful. You can still fight one thing. Fighting everything at once? No. And even if the answer is yes, it is extremely difficult and demands patience, consistency, and endurance, qualities many people simply do not possess at all. Cripple is a stereotypical term that can be used both literally and figuratively. These are people who are more likely to be humiliated and pushed into the mud than offered a helping hand. And today I will explain this in narrative form, even though it is obvious enough as it is. There was a girl of 13, let us call her Lyra, who had problems with her legs from birth. Her feet were turned inward, facing each other, which meant that throughout her life she either had to use a wheelchair or walk on crutches. School life was unbearable, and this was not only about going to the toilet or all the practical inconveniences her condition caused, it was also about everyday life in general. She was laughed at, her peers would not leave her alone, and all she could do was direct all her strength into studying, just to be better than all of them, at least in this. Then one incident occurred that had a devastating effect on the girl. Once, during a break, when everyone in the classroom was going wild, her school bag was on the windowsill. She had put it there so it would be easier to take out her notebooks and textbooks, and then one of her classmates threw the bag out of the open window. It was the 3rd floor. She saw it happen, just like everyone else. For everyone else, the situation was amusing, but not for Lyra. She had to go down to the 1st floor on crutches, then outside to retrieve her bag and then climb back up to the classroom. She was crying and hurrying down, afraid that someone else would take her bag. When she reached the place where it should have been lying, it was no longer there. Another boy had already taken it and carried it off, so she was left without her notebooks and books. As she stood there crying, some girls walked past, and one of them kicked Lyra's crutches. Lyra fell. The girl bent over her and said, "A cripple should lie on the ground," which is exactly what happened to Lyra. She never went back to school. For several days she lay at home, and the words, "You are a cripple," kept spinning endlessly in her head. The child was morally shattered. Physically, she had been broken by nature itself. That thought stayed in her head until the end of her short life. For another 3 years she suffered, worked with tutors and psychotherapists, and at 16, a week before her birthday, she jumped off a bridge, deciding that in her case it was the only correct solution. But before that, she put on a t-shirt with the word "Cripple" written on it, so that no one would have any doubts. In the end, the cripple lay on the ground. When she fantasized about it before making her decision, the phrase kept repeating in her head again and again. That is how she chose this very way of saying goodbye to life. A cripple should lie on the ground. There is no point in looking for someone to blame here, because people search for consequences, but no one looks at the origins. They blame life, parents, school, cruel children, anyone at all, except nature itself, which made her the way she was, because something can be done about consequences, but nothing can be done about nature. Now for a second case, which shows the opposite effect. Let us call him Petya. Petya was 51. He had been a beggar on the streets for as long as he could remember. He called himself a cripple, and always kept his hand in plain sight. His left arm was half the length of his right, and that made him a cripple, if not in the eyes of society, then certainly in his own. In snow and in heat alike, he kept it visible to evoke pity. Look at me, I'm a cripple. Give me arms because I cannot work. Even though many others in similar situations lived perfectly normal lives, had he lived in the 14th or 15th century, he could easily have passed for a court jester, and everyone would have been satisfied. But he was satisfied anyway. Every day he earned a decent sum of money from his condition, and if he had not drunk it all away, by the age of 51 he could have bought himself a flat. But easy money always leads to easy spending. As easily as it comes, so easily it goes. No one had ever told him in his life that a cripple should lie on the ground. They told him to stop begging, to go and work, to do something useful, and many other things. He provoked disgust rather than a desire to humiliate. And why was that? Because from the very beginning he accepted his condition and turned it into an asset, not a flaw. And that is why people's attitude towards him changed. He was beaten and humiliated only by his drinking companions when they could not divide the next bottle. And that was all. Even that did not trouble him much. After all, it went both ways, not just one. A cripple should lie on the ground is a phrase applied only to those who are not ready to accept their condition, who they are. But in the case of acceptance, as I explained above, it is quite possible to exist.